Welcome to the Best Team Wins podcast with Adam Robinson. He's talking to today's industry leaders and entrepreneurs about the people side of their business.
Welcome to the Best Team Wins podcast, where we feature entrepreneurs and business leaders whose exceptional approach to the people side of their business has led to incredible results. My name is Adam Robinson, and for the next 25 minutes, I'll be your host as we explore how to build your business through better hiring. Today on the program, Maria Katris is the co-founder and CEO at Built-In, located in Chicago. The company was founded in 2010. She currently has 65 employees and is backed by some firms you may know: Math Venture Partners, Dundee Venture Capital, PGVC, Firestarter Fund here in Chicago, and others. And we are excited to have you on the program today.
Thanks for having me.
So before we dig in, I want to give the audience some fun facts about you. Last year, you were named to the 2017 Crain's Chicago Business 40 Under 40 list. Congratulations.
Thanks.
Previously, the founder of Nanny Boutique, a Chicago-based nanny placement agency, which you sold 2 years after founding. And you've got over 15 years of all kinds of experience in marketing, strategy, consulting. You've worked in healthcare, technology, in-home services, now recruitment, marketing, and brand building. And we were really pumped to dig in here. Give us 30 seconds on Built-In. What are you guys doing?
Yeah, absolutely. Built-In is a content and a community-driven recruitment platform for technology companies across the U.S. We primarily focus on helping companies drive high-quality inbound talent, primarily around engineering, data, IT, and then sales, which are the two hardest to find categories right now.
And if listeners want to learn more about what you do, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. They can go visit builtin.com for one and check out our national brand. If they're in any of our local markets that we serve, Chicago, Colorado, New York, Boston, LA, Seattle, and Austin, they can go to Built-In Austin, builtinseattle.com, and find all of our platforms.
So you started this business, this is 8 years ago now.
Almost,
yeah, about the same time we started. I know we launched together about the same time. Tell me what problem you saw in the market, because our listeners are always asking about employment brand and why job boards don't work and what should I do with this digital spend that I don't think I'm getting a return on. So, of course, a leading question, but describe the landscape 8 years ago and how it shifted for businesses that are looking to drive quality talent into the funnel.
Yeah, absolutely. 8 years ago, employer branding was not a coined term. No one knew what that was or what it meant. The gap I saw in the market, specifically in Chicago at that time, which is where we started, was that there really was no one promoting local technology companies. There was a lot of complaining about why we weren't Silicon Valley and we didn't have capital and we didn't have talent. And I was just surrounded. I did a short stint running a nonprofit here for tech entrepreneurs, and I was surrounded by all these successful entrepreneurs. And Chicago had a 20-year history between Morningstar and Career Builder and Orbitz, right? There were a decent amount of technology companies, but no one was talking about it. And so I had approached my board member at the time, who's now on my board of Built-In, and I said, Ellen, here's what we need to do. And it was, in essence, I drew up what a PR machine would look like. Well, a month later, Matt Moog, who's the chairman of our board and originally started Built-In Chicago's website, he was having pizza and beer in his office one night with about 10 local tech CEOs. Their issue and their problem they were solving for was very similar in that they knew there were a number of startups starting to take ground here in Chicago, and they wanted a better way to connect with one another and then promote the Chicago story to the rest of the world. So about a month after I had approached my board member at this nonprofit, Matt launched Built-In Chicago as a social networking site for the local community. When I saw it go live, I immediately emailed him and I said, I need to come over and learn how to use this. This is exactly what I was thinking about, but it has to be entrepreneur-led. And the rest is history. I stalked him for about 5 months until finally he was like, I need someone to run this. And it was pretty easy. I raised my hand, was like, I want to do this. And so initially it was really to promote local tech companies. What's happened in the last 8 years and what we realized as we were figuring out product market fit was that we quickly honed in on the fact that the most frequented thread on the Ning platform was the thread where people could promote their open jobs. And so we knew that was a major pain point. And I always wanted to build a business that solved a major pain point. And so simultaneously, we had a blogging platform. And we would write about tech companies. At the time, it was me. Now we have an in-house content team. But every time we wrote about tech companies, whether they were launching or raising funding or some other founding story, we would start to get inbound emails saying, when you wrote about us, we got really high quality talent. We got high quality investor interest and press inquiries from national press. So we knew we were onto something and we knew it was really valuable. And so we made a pretty big bet early on before we even really had a revenue model on the talent side that we were going to focus on talent and recruitment. What we didn't know is that the market was going to shift to virtually zero unemployment, right? Which it is today. Right. And so what started as a mission-driven, we're here to promote local technology companies and we're unapologetically positive, has evolved into a highly differentiated recruitment platform because it just so happens that unemployment's the lowest it's ever been and tech unemployment's even worse. In addition, the millennial workforce has completely redefined how they look for jobs, right? Because they're gainfully employed. So they're not actually looking at job boards because they're gainfully employed, but they're also not looking at job postings because they don't resonate with them. They could work anywhere. So what they're looking for is mission, purpose, values. They want to know who they're going to be working for. They want to know if they're going to have impact, their career pathing, et cetera. It just so happened that the content we were creating is exactly what they wanted in the way they wanted it. And so in some ways, while we were zeroing in on the talent piece, what we didn't realize is how quickly we would hit this time in the market where we're the only platform giving candidates what they want.
Talk about the shift from, the job-centric view of marketing, recruiting to the company or brand centric shift. I mean, we see it with our customers as well. I mean, it's job boards are important, but most people consume content and are passive with what they do, and that's where brand comes in. So, talk to us about why are larger companies starting to allocate dollars outside of the traditional channels?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think our corporate customers are the best example of this, right? When we started out, we were serving very small technology companies. And what we realized was for startups and really young tech companies, the pain we were solving for them was that they had such a hard time just getting on people's radar, whether it was investors or outside press or talent. And so for them, it was more like, wow, I actually have a platform that's going to write about me, because historically, you weren't getting press or attention until after you raised that first round of funding. And especially if you were in the B2B space like you guys are, and you had Hierology, right? It's not sexy. So it's not a consumer brand. And so it was very hard for the B2Bs to get any sort of attention or anyone talking about them. And so that was the pain point we solved for that group of companies. But then what's happened now is with the larger companies, everything's becoming digital. And so in the next 3 to 5 years, I think Deloitte did a study saying 85% of CEOs interviewed believe their business will be digital in the next 3 to 5 years. So tech is no longer an industry. It's actually just a way of doing business. It's a way of life. And so what's happened is you've got, very large corporations, think Discover, Walgreens, Allstate, Capital One. 10 years ago, you would never have called one of them a technology company, right? And so, but yet they're facing the biggest challenge right now because no one knows how much tech they're building. And so they need to amplify that story, but they need to get in front of the audience in a way that only we can get in front of for them. They don't have that capacity to. So we're almost rebranding them to a different generation of a job seeker, potentially. So that's been the major shift. And now part of the other problem with low unemployment is that everyone has to differentiate. So, I call it table stakes. Everyone has a ping pong table now. Everyone has LaCroix in their refrigerators. Those are no longer differentiators. So the only thing in my mind that differentiates one company from the next is its people, right? It's the people. And so by being human and humanizing recruitment and telling people stories, That's what matters now. And that's what this generation wants.
Yeah, you're singing my song there on that. You published a concept on builtin.com called Recruitment 3.0. And you outlined some things in a list that are changing. And I think, listeners, are out there thinking about, at their level, no matter how big the company, what can I be doing? What should I know about changing how I approach the talent pool in my market, whatever that market is? And I think, it's interesting and relevant. Take us through a couple of things that, what is Recruitment 3.0 and why do people need to know these things?
Yeah, absolutely. The way we look at recruitment is when you think about Recruitment 1.0, we refer to the transactional model of the job board era, right? It's company posts a job, a candidate applies to that job. It was very transactional marketplace model. LinkedIn came around and we call it Recruitment 2.0, and they revolutionized how recruitment. They introduced this whole notion of a passive job seeker. They knew that if they built this amazing consumer network, that's what people wanted. They wanted connectivity online. And this is when technology was booming and everything was becoming tech. What's happened now is there's so much noise. And so we have moved to Recruitment 3.0, which is we lead with content, we lead with community. And the community piece is actually not to be discounted. Content is very important. But at this point, people want humans. People want to meet you. There's a statistic, I think it's over 50% of candidates these days want to actually meet your team before they apply to the job. So
Before they apply.
Interesting. And so we've embedded events as part of our recruitment strategy. And companies hire somewhere between 2 and 10 per event from these events we do. And it's because we're human. We also impart that on our sales team. So we go to market and we meet our customers, no matter the size. We invite them out. We have face-to-face conversations with them. And the reaction they give us is pretty surreal in that you're a vendor that sticks out above all others because you actually do this. Because if you think about right now, our collective buyers, they're being inundated with HR tech solutions. Oh, yeah. Their heads are spinning day in and day out. They don't know what to do. And the problem right now is that they are getting a lot of inbound, high volume from the massive transactional job boards, but they tend to be much lower quality. And so their recruiters are spending a lot of time sourcing through a high volume of resumes only to really end up with nothing. And so it's wasting their time. On the flip side, while sourcing used to work, it no longer works. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal saying engineers don't want to be found on LinkedIn anymore, right? There's a reason for that. They're sick of everyone emailing them and in-mailing them. And so nothing's working. Recruiters are increasingly getting frustrated. And so if you can actually drive them high quality inbound and qualify those candidates on things outside of a job description, such as culture, mission, values, what size of company. So they're actually having very educated job seekers come into their funnel. And that has fundamentally changed their lives and how they recruit and how they work. We've made their lives easier. And I think that's the lens that we operate under is how do we help our customers and solve a big pain point for them?
This feels to me more like digital retailing than anything else. And that, that's something we talk about in our markets. Jobs are products and they need to be retailed to a consumer for that product. It's just like any other product. And it sounds like that's the path you're on.
Absolutely. We have a funny example to add on to that is we had a customer, a pretty large customer, who said, we're not seeing the conversions that we really were expecting. And we looked on our end and saw really high numbers of views to their jobs, traffic to their profile. It just didn't add up. And so when our product team dug in, they found that they had a 40-page application for engineers.
Not fun.
And they were asking engineers to submit social security numbers.
Wow.
And so there is a massive re-education that we need to do, and you'll see us start to do moving forward, is I think we need to re-educate the market and recruiters who have been doing this for 20 plus years, what they need to do to be competitive moving forward. Because that's not being competitive. You're basically at that point signaling to the market that you do not want to hire engineers.
Yeah, and with what we know to be north of 70% of all job applications and searches start in a browser on a mobile device. What I want everyone to do after they're done listening, I want you to get out your phone and try to apply to a job at your own company and just ask yourself the question, would I jump through these hoops? I mean, do I have to retype my resume with my thumbs? Are you making me fill out a job seeker profile? I mean, it's amazing the number of companies that require people to register as applicants. And I can imagine that cripples conversion rates pretty quickly.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's talk about you and your team. So 8 years ago, you started, with you and a pretty small circle. Talk about the team today, and as you build your organization, what are things that you're doing differently to source for your own business that you've had to pick up along the way, as the market's tightened? Because you're struggling for the same people that everybody's struggling for.
Yeah, we're in a hard spot, and you'll probably laugh when you hear this, but our job is to make companies like Hireology successful. And so we're here to serve every market we're in and write content. Problem is we can't write all this content about built-in
right.
to help us recruit. So we inherently have put ourselves in a really bad spot because we're not branding ourselves enough. Mm-hmm. And frankly, we're a really humble group, and humility is one of our most important, it's one of my most important qualities in any hire we make. But sometimes being humble and not being outward facing actually does you a disservice sometimes. And so striking that balance has been something that I'm starting to realize has to happen. Like, how do you stay humble, but then portray the right brand to the market?
Sure.
And balancing that is honestly something that is a everyday struggle for me, because that's just not inherent in who I am. But we're working on it. And
yeah, well, so strong advocacy does not require a loss of humility, right? But that is
Correct.
A pretty fine line to walk.
Correct. And, I think in our space, in our industry, time and time again, we see these founders, right? And you probably know a handful, just like I do, who go on the warpath with press really early on to the demise of their business. And so I really focused on building the business for a really long time under a rock. And now we're starting to come out of that mode. And now I'm finding that the best way for me to recruit, and where I'm spending increasingly amounts of time, is breakfast, lunches, drinks with prospective candidates. And now it's more about finding the right people. And once I find them, I'll find a seat for them on the bus, and I'll reorg if I need to get them on the bus. And so now it's just that volume of booking up my calendar with those meetings has become very important, but I'm seeing the highest ROI.
You mentioned humility as a value, important value of the business. What other values have you defined, and how do you leverage those to market built-in as a place for the right kind of people?
Yeah, so we are actually looking at our values to make them more statement-driven right now, but our values include accountability, trust, passion, respect, teamwork, and I may have forgot one. No, I didn't. I got them all. This is how I look at it, and what we're changing to is saying we're sort of saying certain things are table stakes. They're non-negotiables. They're expected, and we're sort of transitioning our values to what really defines our team and what makes us work. I think for me, those core values are embedded every 2 weeks. We do a weekly all hands meeting every 2 weeks, and we give shout outs of the week to all of the employees. Give each other shout outs of the week based on core values. So they're embedded in our recruitment process. I interview every candidate that walks in the door at the very end. And I dig for that. And, and they ask me a lot. They say, what do you mean by accountability and trust? And I give them very specific examples, right? Like, we all mess up. If you mess up, you say you messed up, and you talk about a solution, right? We're all human. A lot doesn't rile me, but everyone knows, like, honesty, accountability, those are just non-negotiable items. And so we really have tried over the years, and we haven't always gotten it right, but we really try hard to vet that out in an interview process.
This isn't your first time building a business. What lessons have you carried through about building teams that you think have helped your success at Built-In?
So, truth be told, my first business was very small. And so what I learned there, though, it was still in the recruitment space, but it was for a different industry. And so I interviewed a lot of people. And then Gary Mecklenburg, the former CEO of Northwestern, who interviewed me when I took a job at Northwestern doing corporate strategy, he's the one who honestly taught me how to recruit. And what I mean by that is I was extremely nervous. I was 24 when I interviewed with him, 25. And I walked into his office and I'm like, I'm interviewing with a CEO for like a strategic analyst position. And I just walked in, I had prepared like every data point you could possibly imagine. And I walk into his office and he's like, so tell me about your family. How'd you grow up? And I was just mind blown. The entire 1 hour I spent with him was 100% about me as a human. So that has informed my interviewing. So when candidates walk in, I see it in their faces. They're nervous. They're like, I'm meeting the CEO. And when they're more junior level candidates, and I'm like, tell me about you as a human. And you see them, they like take a double take because they just never expect that question. But it tells me so much about them. Like
what are some of the things you hear?
I can figure out how hardworking, where did they come from? How were they raised? I have of course, a heart for children of immigrant entrepreneurs or immigrants because I'm a child of immigrant entrepreneur parents. And there's just this, I can suss out work ethic from it, right? I can suss out teamwork because they'll tell me about playing sports. I can understand, are they close to their family today or are they distant? When I ask them questions like, how would your friends describe you, right? How would your parents describe you? What would your manager, I start to see patterns. But I really trust my team to vet out their skills. So when they're with me, it's more about, are you going to be a culture add to this team? And if not, I feel like it's my responsibility to make sure I vet that out.
How has the leadership infrastructure in the company grown? Net with 65 people, I mean, you can't do it all yourself. Right. You've hit that point where you have to start getting work done through others. Talk about how you're putting that in place. I mean, how are you building people inside Built-in?
Yeah, it's interesting. That's probably one of the biggest challenges, right? We all face. It's the growth. You have your first 10 employees, and I think one of my biggest fears, and I'm very protective of them, is I want to make sure they keep growing and we set them up for success, but also complement them with people who have had more experience and maybe have been there, done it a little bit more. And striking that balance is harder than I ever anticipated. And just navigating that for them and with them, meaning helping them understand that their Legos aren't getting taken away. They're just trading one set of Legos for another set, right? And so I spend a lot of time taking them on one-on-ones and meeting with people that don't even report to me anymore just to make sure they're okay and they're adjusting well, because the org structure changes every 6 to 9 months probably. Sure. And as we find more and more candidates that we know can add value in a significant way, we bring them in. And that causes another reorg, right? And so balancing that with career pathing for the younger candidates is actually something that I spend a lot of my time thinking about.
What's the balance in your hiring? When you're 10 people, it's, you're hiring generalists, you're shifting to hiring specialists. Are your legacy early believers making that transition to specialist, or is that a voluntary transition? Or people learning why that's important?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'll give you a couple of examples of our early employees. Our first 5 account execs, one moved to LA and is no longer with us, but the other 4 are all still with Built-in, and they've been with us for over 3 and 4 years. The one's almost coming up on her 5th. One is now doing larger deals. She stayed in sales and is doing larger deals. One is part of the sales org, but now she's doing our market launches. She's super entrepreneurial. Mm-hmm. The second she got on the hamster wheel, she would get bored. And I knew that. And so we made sure we set her up for success and gave her that opportunity to do something that she thrives in and wants to do. The other one became my chief of staff. And then the last one actually manages our account management team and our huge renewal side of our house at the age of 27. And so we really quickly identified what are their strengths, and they didn't all have the same path, but we try to move them into positions to keep them successful. Adam, who's in essence built the business with me, he started doing everything from managing the engineering team to customer support. And we joke he still does it to this day. But now he leads our whole growth team. SEO and our B2B marketing all roll into him. And his role just keeps expanding. And he's an amazing example of someone who is self-taught, self-built. And he just keeps growing with the business. And it's been amazing to watch him do that. And then, we had another situation where we had an amazing startup CTO. But he was remote and we needed someone in the office. That became a very big pain point. And so we brought in a growth CTO, but now our original startup CTO is still with us. He's just transitioned into an individual contributor role and he's thriving. It was the best move for him, right? And so we're trying our best to keep people when it makes sense. Now, along the way, there's always people who don't want to grow, don't want to make that transition. And then you just have an honest conversation about it, right? We've all been there and I can't force fit it, but I think I constantly am trying to get one step in front of that because my biggest fear is that one day I won't be able to keep them because I can't grow, move them fast enough.
Yep.
But they all know that we have the open conversation of, if you ever get to that point, let's have a conversation. And guess what? I will help you get your next role.
What if I'm having a conversation with Maria Katris about I don't belong here anymore? What does that sound like?
It actually happened. My current chief of staff was in a sales role, but didn't want to be in a sales role anymore. And so we must have had 4 or 5 conversations and drew out what are her priorities in a role. What does she want most? We talked about grad school. We talked about external roles. Did she want help? I knew she was going on an interview. I asked her how it went. We talked about it. We laughed about it, pros, cons of it. So I'm really open with my team. And I'll actually...
Sounds like it.
This week alone, I had 2 conversations where I was like, I said, I know that if I don't move you into this capacity, I will lose you in 12 months. So my goal is to get you into this capacity. And we talk about it. And I ask them, and they are very transparent with me because they know that I will help them even leave externally and place them externally if they need to, and if I can't give them what they need internally. And so I'm encouraging my senior leaders to do the same thing. And so as we implement annual reviews, which we'll implement starting 2019, we're going to have sort of the tour of duty that I've stole from LinkedIn because Mike Amson is an amazing mentor and advisor to me. But it's the whole notion of you recommit for a year to the business and into the role. And if not, that's an opportunity to say, you know what, I think I'm done at the end of this year, or in the next 12 months, I need to have this as part of my role to really commit again the following year. And so it just brings up this, you make it part of your culture that it's normal and it's open. And then people aren't sneaking off to interview. The managers know, right? And then as a business, you protect yourself because you know to plan for that transition and backfill that. So it's a win-win.
Yep.
It's a win-win.
As you look out over the next 5 years, what would you identify as the most important trend that listeners need to plug into to be successful in recruiting high quality candidates? What's thematically, what would you say is that thing?
I think it's meet candidates where they are. It's if they go to events, you need to be present at those events. If they like to hang out at arcades, go hang out at arcades. When you tell your story, don't tell your story from a B2B marketing standpoint. Tell your story based on what a candidate or a potential candidate that you don't even know exists would want to hear. Be human. We tell companies all the time, sometimes people have very heavy brand standards when they work with us, and they want the copy to be according to their brand standards. And we push back a lot and we say, that's not what users want. They don't want the lip service. They don't want the jargon. They want humans and they want real people. And it's okay to say, we're not good at this because you're not good for everyone, but we are good at this. And so I think the more human everyone gets, the more real, the more authentic, and you'll start to see that with our products that we're going to roll out, the more success you'll have recruiting.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's the final word you've been learning from Maria Katris, co-founder and CEO at Built-In. Maria, thank you for being with us on the show today.
Thanks, Adam.
And that is a wrap for this week's episode of the Best Team Wins podcast, where we're featuring entrepreneurs and business leaders whose exceptional approach to the people side of their business has led to incredible results. My name is Adam Robinson, author of the book The Best Team Wins, which you can find online at www.thebestteamwins.com. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you here next week.
Thanks for listening to the Best Team Wins podcast with Adam Robinson. You can find out more information about Adam and his book, The Best Team Wins, Building Your Business Through Predictive Hiring, at thebestteamwins.com. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next week.